Let's go again.
They call it Freedom Wars. In a way, it makes perfect sense. The game revolves around your loss of freedom and the battles, or rather the wars you fight in order to gain that freedom back. When stripped to the core, it's basically a hunting game. Although there are a few variations to the main missions, you won't find much more variety from this title. It's a hunting game. There's just no way around it. Does that make it a bad game? Not by a long stretch. But it's nice to know what you're getting yourself into. Here's my review of Freedom Wars for the PlayStation Vita. How does this game look? Absolutely stunning. Main missions take place in huge open environments with changing weather effects that help to diversify the look of the battlefield. You can see enemy rockets leave a trail of faint smoke and sonic lasers that, when combined with the surrounding chaos, provide a visual light show. All this happening while running at a near consistent frame rate. Enemy hunters are varied and have great detail. No one here looks like a carbon copy of the other. The same can be said about the towering abductors. They're massive in size, making you feel insignificant in its presence. Your teammates look great too. Everyone has their own individual style and personality. Eye-catchy cutscenes are used sparingly, but effective. It sounds impressive when I describe it, but more so when you see it in action. With that being said, there are just a few minor issues. The underground environments of your panopticon are bland in comparison to the outside mission area. I feel like there's just too much empty space. Although the look improves as you advance further into the story, the first half of the game are drab and lifeless. Then again, when I think about it, the desolate nature of your panopticon does add to the Orwellian theme of the game. There's also quite a bit of character pop-in and slowdown in these areas as well, which is strange because there's really not much else happening in the hub world that would cause this. Other than that, the game is just beautiful. Just like the graphics, the sound is equally amazing. There appears to be a musical piece to fit every situation. Really smooth sounding audio during conversations and fast electric techno beats during combat. The game also lets you choose your own battle theme from a few selections. The sound effects are nice too. Loud explosions and lasers fly from every direction. You really get a sense of the destruction going on around you. It's awesome when you hear the screech of an abductor right before it's about to go down. The Japanese voiceovers are great, although it would have been nice to have an additional English dub as well. My only complaint is the repetitive propaganda that they spew over the loudspeaker. It was sort of cool in the beginning, but then got a little annoying. And your accessory talks way too much. Sometimes you just want to tell it to shut the hell up.
Let's go again.
The controls can feel awkward and frustrating at first, and to be honest, they're gonna take a while to get used to. Switching back and forth between your melee and assault weapon just doesn't feel as smooth as it should. The lock-on system is a little cumbersome as well. You basically have to hold down the button before you get a character lock, instead of just tapping, which would have been a lot easier. It works, but I found myself having trouble locking on to my intended target. Most of the time, I would just lock on to a random part of the abductor, and then basically cycle through all the options till I landed on the part I wanted. The camera can also become a problem. Sometimes it will spin and place you in the worst possible position. For me, it occurred most often after a thorn whip or when I landed beneath an abductor. For the most part, the controls work given time and practice. Fighting abductors alone is fine. The problem stems from you having to deal with the individual enemy hunters. It's the one-on-one battles you have with these smaller enemies that will test your patience. They're just way too fast and nimble. Trying to attack them is either hit or miss, literally. It's like you have to be directly in front of them to make any sort of contact. Can someone tell me if there's an entitlement that would allow me to shoot from behind cover? The game doesn't let me do this, but for some reason I feel like it should. One thing I did like about the controls is the ability to use the touchscreen as a fingerprint scanner to accept an entitlement or confirm a sentence. It reminded me of a futuristic way of signing a deed, or some sort of important document, which really helps to pull you into this world. A small touch, but I thought I'd mention it. Like I said, the controls do get easier the more you play the game. By that point, you have a better grasp of what weapons to use and when and if you should resort to melee attacking or not. Just be prepared for a few frustrating battles later on. Let me know what you think of the Code 7 test mission. Upon starting the game, you're immediately overwhelmed by the amount of stuff thrown at you. Do this, do that, read this menu here, modify that weapon over there. It's a little mind-boggling. It's not the kind of game you start on a whim, so make sure you have a couple of hours set aside if you're playing for the first time. There is a lot to take in. One annoying feature that is introduced to you is the menu system. Why did they have to make it so confusing? And why is there 3 separate menus? One on the wall, one for pressing the start button, and another for talking to your accessory. Like I said, there's a lot to take in, and navigating the menu layout alone is going to take a while. Now, as punishment for losing your memory, you're demoted to Sinner rank, which involves having a 1,000,000-year sentence placed on your head, as well as constant surveillance by your accessory. Basically an android who provides assistance during your missions and spies on you while you sleep. You definitely get a sense that Big Brother is watching. Except this time, Big Brother is a cute little teddy bear displayed on a giant television screen. You're constantly reminded of your contributions after each code rank advancement, and if you forget, then the speech over the loudspeaker will surely drill it into your ears even further. Not only are you being watched, you have all your rights and privileges stripped from you. You can't run, you can't talk to certain people, you can't stay quiet for too long during a conversation, and so forth. Break any of these crimes and you get additional years tacked on to your 1,000,000-year sentence. Now, having broken my first crime, I was constantly on edge. I was afraid to do anything in fear of having to serve additional time. This idea, in my opinion, was truly genius. It leaves the player in constant fear and really drives home that feeling of a society living under constant watch. Because of this, the beginning of the game started off very slow for me. I hadn't gotten the entitlement to fast travel yet, so getting from one point to the next was very tedious. Stricken with the fear of having more years added to my sentence, I was reduced to walking to progress through the beginning part of the story. Speaking of story, I was kind of disappointed how the Orwellian theme of the game wasn't touched upon later on. You get a strong sense of a society under strict government rule early on, but for some reason, this all seems to fall by the wayside the further you get into the game. The main story takes over, and it pales in comparison to the overall theme that was first introduced. I wish they would have played around with this idea a little more. Maybe have your character create some sort of uprising within the state, or plan some sort of secret escape. I don't know. All I know is we're left with this average story involving boring dialogue and character backstory. The game doesn't really take off until your first mission against an abductor. This is basically the bulk of the gameplay and pretty much what you'll be doing throughout the entirety of the campaign. Freedom Wars plays like a third-person hack and slash with shooting thrown in. The core gameplay reminds me of Devil May Cry. Although it's not as smooth in Freedom Wars, you're able to carry 2 weapons at once, a melee and a gun type, occasionally switching between the 2. You're sent in with your accessory as well, and a team of your choosing, who also bring along their own accessory. You fight as a unit to bring down the abductor any way you see fit. You can all latch on to the abductor and pull it down for a close melee kill, while others on your team can hop on top and start cutting away at the limbs, which I might add feels oh so satisfying. Or you can all just stand back and blow to hell with your most powerful assault weapon. Severed limbs and any resources found on the battlefield can be contributed towards customization rewards or lowering your 1,000,000-year sentence. You also get entitlement points, which you can use to buy back your lost abilities, such as running or talking to certain people. Your goal basically is trying to reduce your sentence to 0. It's not mandatory to complete the game, but it should give you a rough idea of how much grinding you'll have to do for full completion. Just a side note, I finished the main story mission and I still had well over 900,000 years on my sentence. You're allowed to equip one of 3 different thorn types before the start of each mission: Binding, Healing, and Shield. I'm gonna be honest with you, I used the Binding Thorn throughout most of the game until the very end where I switched to the Shield, simply out of curiosity. The game can be played solo or with other players online. Playing solo wasn't too bad. Your AI teammates do an adequate job of providing support. They're not the brightest bunch, but at least I was still able to complete the campaign. Online co-op is where it's really at. Finding an online match was either hit or miss, but for the most part worked as it should. Levels that were once frustrating actually became a lot more enjoyable. Definitely adds a whole nother level to the replayability. Just can't beat that special feeling you get when you know you're playing with actual real people. There are a few varieties to the abductor missions, such as saving captured citizens, collecting resources, and suppressing enemy forces. Occasionally, you'll have to do an annoying capture the flag type mission, but for the most part, it's the first 3 objective types you'll be doing over and over. Truth be told, it can get a little repetitive and long-winded, but that's the beauty of it. It's the grind that people enjoy, because the reward allows you to fully customize and upgrade your gear. It's the thrill you get from upgrading that weapon you've been using for the last several hours or days. Add in online co-op, and those weapons you've been upgrading can be shown off to your friends. Weapons can be bought, upgraded, and modified. There's an endless amount to what you can do. This is where the RPG element comes into play. You don't level up your character, but rather the equipment you're using. So in a way, it's the weapons that are the real star of the show. There's practically a ton to choose from, all catering to a specific playstyle. And this, my friend, I assure you, is the real heart of what makes Freedom Wars so great. It's the ability to choose and play how you see fit. It's the freedom of choice out in the battlefield that makes it so much fun, which is ironic because it's the complete opposite when you're in your Panopticon. The only problem is the massive amount of grinding you're gonna have to do to get there. If you're willing to sit through it, the payoff is definitely worthwhile. Freedom Wars for the PlayStation Vita comes recommended.